For more than 2 decades, Kelly Ripa has walked onto morning television smiling, joking, and making millions of viewers feel as if everything in her life came easily. But behind that familiar smile were hospital rooms. A devastating accident that changed her family forever, painful battles behind the live desk, and losses she could not hide even when the cameras were rolling. At 55, Ripa can look back on an extraordinary career. But some of the hardest chapters of her life happened far away from the applause, and one of the first began when she woke up in a hospital wearing an outfit she would never forget. Long before Kelly Ripa became one of the most recognizable faces on American daytime television, she was simply a young woman from Stratford, New Jersey, trying to build a life in show business. She had grown up in a working family. Her mother, Esther, was a homemaker, while her father, Joseph, drove a bus and served as a labor union leader. Kelly was a cheerleader at Eastern Regional High School, studied psychology briefly at Camden County College, then left school and headed for New York. By 1990, everything was beginning to work. She landed the role of troubled party girl Haley Vaughn on All My Children. The soap would eventually keep her for 12 years and introduce her to the man who changed her private life as much as television changed her career. Mark Consuelos joined the show as Mateo Santos. Kelly met him in 1995. On May 1, 1996, they eloped. Then, in 1997, their young marriage was suddenly interrupted by a frightening medical emergency. Ripa later revealed in her 2022 memoir, Livewire, Long-Winded Short Stories, that she and Mark were being intimate when she suddenly lost consciousness. When she opened her eyes again, she was in a hospital. The cause, according to Ripa, was 2 ruptured ovarian cysts. She recovered, but Kelly being Kelly, she later turned even that frightening night into comedy. Mark had apparently rushed her to the hospital dressed in an unforgettable combination: oversized warm-up pants, a leotard, and red Manolo Blahnik heels. She joked in her memoir that her normally stylish husband had somehow dressed her like a dime store prostitute during her moment of need. But only 2 years later, there was nothing funny about the phone call her family would receive. In 1999, Kelly's sister Linda was 7 months pregnant when her car was struck head-on by a speeding vehicle. Linda suffered devastating injuries, including a shattered pelvis and other broken bones. Her unborn baby went into a coma in the womb and was eventually delivered nearly 7 weeks premature. Against terrifying odds, the child survived. Linda later called him her miracle baby. But Linda's own life would never return to what it had been before the crash. She was left with chronic pain and serious physical damage. In 2001, Kelly described just how completely the accident had transformed their family, revealing that their mother had effectively become Linda's round-the-clock nurse. Kelly was still years away from becoming the woman millions would watch every morning. Yet before Liv made her famous for laughter, she had already learned something much harder. Sometimes the person smiling for everyone else is carrying a family crisis no audience can see. In November 2000, Kelly Ripa walked into what looked like the opportunity of a lifetime. Kathy Lee Gifford had left Live, and Regis Philbin was testing potential replacements. Ripa's first tryout on November 1st became memorable almost immediately when psychic Char Margolis suggested on air that Kelly was pregnant. Ripa, who had not yet told her bosses, blurted out, "I haven't told my boss yet." The spontaneous moment captured exactly what producers wanted. She was quick, unfiltered, and comfortable enough to turn her private life into television. On February 5, 2001, she was officially announced as Philbin's new co-host. From the audience's perspective, Ripa had won one of daytime television's most coveted jobs. Behind the scenes, however, she later described an experience that was far less glamorous. In a 2023 interview with Variety, Ripa said it took roughly 3 seasons before she was given her own office. Until then, she said she was placed in a space that had previously been used as a janitor's closet, despite other offices being available. It didn't make a whole lot of sense, she recalled. The message she felt she was receiving was difficult to ignore. She may have been sitting beside the star of the program every morning, but that did not necessarily mean she was being treated as his equal. The bathroom situation became even more humiliating. According to Ripa, Regis had access to a private restroom, while she had to use the public bathroom shared with the studio audience. Live could accommodate roughly 250 audience members, meaning Ripa sometimes had to stand in line with viewers between her television duties. The arrangement became especially difficult while she was pregnant with her daughter Lola, who was born on June 16, 2001, only months after Kelly officially joined the show. She later called the situation needlessly difficult. There were smaller battles that carried the same message. Ripa told Variety that when she finally received an office, it was the one previously occupied by Philbin after he had left the program. She said executives initially resisted because they wanted to preserve it for a potential new male co-host. By then, Ripa had spent years proving that she could help carry the franchise, yet she still felt she had to fight for things that appeared automatic for the men around her. Her relationship with Regis was more complicated than their easy on-camera chemistry suggested as well. When Ripa was first offered the job, she later wrote in her 2022 memoir Livewire that her agent delivered an ominous warning from the program. They want you to know who your boss is. Ripa has been careful not to erase the good parts of their partnership, but she has also resisted turning those years into a fairy tale. I don't want to feel like I'm slamming anyone or that I'm being disrespectful, she explained. But I also want people to know it was not a cakewalk. Still, she stayed. When Philbin retired in 2011, Ripa became the anchor around which Live was rebuilt. Michael Strawn joined her permanently in September 2012, and once again the partnership looked effortless on television. Together, they would eventually win Daytime Emmys for Outstanding Entertainment Talk Show Host in both 2015 and 2016. Then, Ripa discovered that another major change was happening around her without her knowledge. In April 2016, ABC announced that Strawn would leave Live for a larger role at Good Morning America. Ripa reportedly learned of the decision shortly before it became public, after the arrangements had already been made. For someone who had spent 15 years helping build the program, the lack of advanced communication became the real wound. She did not appear on the next several broadcasts, and when she returned on April 26th, she addressed viewers directly, framing what had happened as a larger conversation about communication, consideration, and most importantly, respect in the workplace. Years later, Ripa admitted how different her decision might have been had she understood from the beginning what the job would demand from her. Had I known how difficult it would have been, I don't know that I would have gone for it, she wrote. By the time Kelly Ripa became one of the most familiar faces on morning television, viewers knew exactly what to expect from her: fast jokes, embarrassing family stories, and an ability to laugh at herself before anyone else could. What they could not see was how different she sometimes felt when the cameras were turned off. In her 2022 memoir, Livewire, long-winded short stories, Ripa disclosed that she had struggled seriously with anxiety and described herself as having a severe case of social anxiety disorder. For a woman whose profession required her to interact comfortably with celebrities, strangers, and a live studio audience almost every weekday, that admission revealed an extraordinary contradiction between the person viewers saw and the experience she described privately. Ripa wrote about periods when her emotional state affected even the most basic parts of her day. She recalled telling her therapist that getting out of bed could feel difficult, that she had almost no energy, and that she sometimes experienced what felt like physical pain. More disturbing were the moments when the cheerful television personality found herself crying away from the audience. She described crying in the shower, crying herself to sleep, and crying backstage before going in front of the cameras. At other times, she wrote, she felt overwhelmed enough that breathing itself seemed difficult. These were not stories invented years later by an outside biographer. They were experiences Ripa chose to disclose herself after decades of being known primarily for her relentless energy. Therapy became an important part of how she learned to manage those feelings. Ripa later told people that her therapist helped teach her to become a stronger advocate for herself and to reconsider the way she interpreted difficult situations. That lesson mattered because Ripa had spent much of adulthood trying to satisfy several demanding roles simultaneously. She was raising Michael, born in 1997, Lola, born in 2001, and Joaquin, born in 2003, while maintaining a television schedule that made her private life part of her professional identity. Motherhood brought another burden that was less visible: guilt. In a 2011 interview, Ripa admitted, "I always feel guilty," adding that she believed many working mothers carried the feeling that they were failing somewhere. Eventually, she stopped trying to achieve an impossible balance. Her solution was surprisingly practical, except that somebody would be disappointed occasionally and understand that nobody would be harmed because every responsibility had not been handled perfectly. That philosophy was tested in a different way when her youngest child struggled academically. Ripa later revealed that Joaquin had been diagnosed with dyslexia and dysgraphia, conditions that affected reading and writing. She and Mark once questioned whether college would even be realistic for him. Rather than hiding that uncertainty, Ripa spoke publicly about the work behind his progress, crediting hard work, determination, remediation, while also explaining that children with dyslexia can develop strengths in other areas, including reading social situations. Years later, the outcome brought the family to tears for a very different reason. Joaquin received multiple college options and ultimately enrolled at the University of Michigan, where he became part of its wrestling program. For Kelly and Mark, it was more than another child leaving home. It represented an achievement they had once feared might remain beyond his reach. Then, in 2022, Ripa found herself worrying about the generation above her as well. Her mother, Esther, underwent heart surgery. Kelly later told viewers that Esther was doing well, but the experience gave her a new appreciation for the hospital workers caring for families during frightening moments. She singled out ICU nurses for their ability to reduce fear and keep relatives informed while patients were vulnerable. Ripa even managed to find humor there. Before the procedure, Esther apparently wanted a simpler hairstyle, so Kelly's father, Joseph, gave his wife a bob haircut himself. Kelly joked afterward that her father had missed his calling as a hairstylist. In 2020, Kelly Ripa lost two men connected to two very different periods of her career. The first was John Callahan, her former All My Children co-star and a close family friend. Callahan died on March 28, 2020, at only 66. For Ripa, this was not simply the death of someone she had once worked beside on a soap opera. Their families had remained deeply connected long after their years on the show, making his death painfully personal. Callahan had played Edmund Gray on All My Children, the same daytime world where Ripa spent 12 years as Haley Vaughn. His former wife and fellow All My Children star Eva LaRue became the godmother of Kelly's eldest son, Michael. Callahan and LaRue's daughter, Kaya, also developed a close friendship with Kelly's daughter, Lola. Their connection had therefore moved well beyond scripts, dressing rooms, and television sets. When Ripa returned to live, after Callahan's death, she did not pretend everything was normal. "I had a really bad weekend this weekend," she told Ryan Seacrest. She described Callahan as a gentleman and remembered his ability to make people laugh, particularly the distinctive remarks their friends had come to call Callahanisms. Then she addressed Eva and Kaya directly, telling them that her family was thinking about them and was so sad and devastated. Only months later, another death forced Kelly to revisit an even more complicated relationship. Regis Philbin died on July 24, 2020, at 88. For television viewers, Regis and Kelly remained inseparable in memory. They had spent roughly a decade together on Live, beginning when Ripa officially became his co-host in 2001 and ending with Philbin's retirement in November 2011. Their chemistry had helped define an era of morning television. Yet their relationship after his departure was far less straightforward than the friendship audiences may have imagined. In a 2017 interview with Larry King, Philbin said that he and Ripa had not remained in contact. He believed she had been very offended when he left the program. Ripa later presented a different side of the story. In Livewire, she said efforts had been made to reconnect with him after his retirement, but those efforts did not rebuild the relationship. Her conclusion was painfully simple. You can't make a person befriend you. That history made Philbin's death emotionally complicated, but it did not erase what he had meant to her career. During Live's tribute, Ripa struggled through tears while reflecting on the strange assumption that certain larger-than-life people somehow seem immune to mortality. Regis is one of the people that we all believed, I think, would somehow figure out a way around the inevitable, she said. There was a cruel symmetry to the two losses. Callahan represented the soap opera years when Ripa was still building her career and family. Philbin represented the television partnership that transformed her from actress into one of America's best-known daytime hosts. Within a matter of months, both men were gone. And neither loss came with the luxury of disappearing from public view. Ripa's job required her to return to the same place where viewers expected humor, celebrity interviews, and easy conversation. In Callahan's case, she openly admitted that grief might affect her performance. With Philbin, she had to mourn someone with whom she shared enormous professional history while acknowledging that their private relationship had become distant. By 2023, Kelly Ripa's professional life had entered a new phase. Ryan Seacrest left his regular role on Live after 6 years, and Mark Consuelos officially joined his wife behind the desk in April. It was an unusual arrangement. The couple who had eloped on May 1, 1996, were now turning a marriage approaching 3 decades into a 5-day-a-week television partnership. The debut brought criticism from some viewers, particularly over how openly affectionate the couple were on camera. Even Ripa admitted to Variety that working together had never been their obvious plan, saying, "We'd be the last people on earth to suggest ourselves to work together for anything." They stayed with it. In 2024, Ripa and Consuelos won the Daytime Emmy for Outstanding Daytime Talk Series Host, giving Kelly another major award in a television career that had already stretched across more than 3 decades. By 2026, Live with Kelly and Mark was firmly established, and Kelly could joke on television about almost anything. On the August 10th episode, for example, she confessed to perhaps the least intimidating crime imaginable: stealing 3 basil leaves from an herb garden at a marina after friends had teased her for never having stolen anything. She even sent photographic evidence to their group chat. But the lighter Kelly's television persona appeared, the more striking it became when she simply could not make a joke. One of those moments came after Kelly and Mark lost Chewy, the dog that had been part of their family for 17 years. Mark explained on Live that Chewy had gradually been eating less for several weeks before eventually stopping for a couple of days. She had become severely dehydrated, he said, and was experiencing neurological problems. The couple ultimately faced a decision Mark described as probably one of the toughest things we've had to do as a married couple. For Kelly, Chewy's death represented much more than losing a pet. Their 3 children were adults by then. Michael, born in 1997, was 29 in 2026. Lola, born in 2001, was 25, and Joaquin, born in 2003, was 23. Chewie had been there while those children grew up and remained after each of them gradually left the family home. As each one of our kids left for college and then moved out on their own, Kelly explained, Chewie remained right there like our steadfast companion. That was when her composure collapsed. Kelly had apparently believed she had already cried enough before the broadcast to discuss Chewie on camera. She had not. "I'm really sorry. I thought I got it all out, guys," she told the audience as she broke down. She apologized repeatedly before saying the words that explained why the loss hurt so much. "God, she gave us so much." It was an unusually vulnerable moment for someone whose profession depends upon continuing the conversation no matter what happens in her private life. Kelly called Chewie so special and such a good girl, while emphasizing that what remained was gratitude for the 17 years their family had shared with her. Then, during the summer of 2026, Kelly herself temporarily disappeared from the live desk. She underwent gum graft surgery and spent roughly 2 weeks away from the program. On July 27th, Mark told viewers that his wife was recovering well, but was under strict medical instructions not to speak while she healed. He also acknowledged that the procedure was painful, joking that Kelly normally tolerated dental work unusually well, so if she admitted this hurt, he knew it was significant. When viewers saw her again on August 10th, she was 55 years old and approaching another milestone, 30 years of marriage to Mark, 36 years since she first arrived on All My Children, and 25 years since she became an official live co-host. Those numbers tell the success story. They do not tell the whole story. Kelly Ripa's life is not tragic because everything went wrong. Quite the opposite. She built an enduring marriage, raised 3 children, survived career upheavals, and became one of daytime television's most durable personalities. What makes her story affecting is the distance between the effortless woman viewers think they know and the private experiences she has gradually chosen to reveal. At 55, Kelly Ripa has spent decades turning uncomfortable moments into laughter. But behind that familiar smile is a life marked by family tragedy, painful goodbyes, private struggles, and battles viewers never saw. Yet through every difficult chapter, she kept returning to the screen and allowing audiences to know a little more of the woman behind the television personality. Which part of Kelly Ripa's story surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with us for more stories about the stars you thought you knew.